To ask whether Andrew's choices has damaged the late Queen's legacy is a really difficult question.
This was a man who was seen as a playboy. Many people say that he was her favourite child.
That's my helicopter.
I think he was the nation's darling.
Were the Queen and Prince Philip good parents? Well, I suppose they were good up to a point, but there's always one rotten egg in the nest, and Andrew was it. Andrew's the sort of person you wouldn't wish to meet. He's arrogant, he's bombastic, it was always me, me, me. Things started going wrong when he met Jeffrey Epstein. He loved the idea of money and lots of it.
Andrew had a degree of trust in this man.
That really was the beginning of the end. After all these years of getting what he wanted, he was now having things taken away from him.
I believe that she did leave a ticking time bomb.
No one ever thought he'd be stripped of the title Prince. That would have never happened on the Queen's watch.
She maybe had a weak spot for him, and I think maybe that she believed him a little bit too much.
If a story lasts longer than 10 days, you've got a problem here. This story has lasted 15 years.
Where did you come? Extraordinary, isn't it?
What made the late Queen such a monumental, incredible person was her authenticity. It was her honesty, it was about duty, it was about sacrifice, it was about service, and it was never about self when she was monarch.
It was her whole ethos, her idea that the monarchy must survive. In order for it to survive, the monarch must be seen to be doing the right thing. In essence, it's all about duty, it's all about continuity, it's all about being there for the people, for the country, for the Commonwealth, and she embraced all those things.
She was one of the most popular royals ever, okay? All around the world. But unfortunately, the Queen always had a PR problem with her son, Andrew.
Andrew's the sort of person you wouldn't wish to meet. He didn't treat staff well. When I was working there, I didn't particularly care for him. No, that's a bit putting it too mild. I didn't like him because he was not the sort of person that one liked.
So I joined the royal household in 2001 as the Assistant Press Secretary to the Queen. So I probably saw Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, on a weekly basis. And if there were big issues that arose, he would ask my advice, ask my counsel, and see what I thought as well. I was actually interviewed by Prince Andrew for the job, to be honest. And one of the questions that the Duke asked is, how would you improve the images of members of the royal family? And there'd just recently been published a photograph of Prince Andrew on a yacht, surrounded by a lot of topless women. And I said, well, sir, I wouldn't be photographed with topless women and appear in newspapers. And there was a sort of quiet, sort of frosty silence, and I thought, oh gosh, that's me, that's curtains for me. But I still got the job.
Andrew was very good at hiding behind a mask. He gave off the impression that he was a jolly nice guy, but behind it all, he's arrogant, he's bombastic.
Ladies and gentlemen, hush up. Good.
I'd certainly spoken to staff members, people that worked with him, whether it was behind the scenes on his charity work, his business pitch at the palace, who just said he had a general sense of entitlement about him. I've yet to meet someone who's worked with him who said he was absolute charm personified and a wonderful man to work with.
This is much more disciplined than the board meetings.
He had an attitude towards people. He's rude to anybody that, for want of a better word, up at his level. So you've got to be either a girl he's dating or a member of the royal family for him to talk to you politely. I believe that there was a total lack of awareness, self-awareness, way back, even in his very early days as a youngster. It was always me, me, me.
Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip proudly introduced Prince Andrew.
He was the first prince to be born to a reigning monarch in over 100 years. He was born, at Buckingham Palace. So therefore, the reality is he's always had that sense of entitlement. Many people say that he was her favourite child. Well, maybe he was, but I think the truth of it is that he was the firstborn at a time when she was at last comfortable with the role.
With the birth of the grandchildren, the happy family was made complete.
We've got to recognise that the late Queen's first family, Charles and Anne, came at a time when the King was very ill. The Queen was standing in for him, and then he died in 1952 and came the coronation, and after the coronation she flew off around the world to visit Commonwealth countries of which she was still head of state. So it was a difficult time for her in establishing a relationship with her first two children. But when the other two came along in 1960 and 64 respectively, Andrew and Edward, by that time all the big stuff had been done and the monarchy had settled down into a sort of regular routine. Both of them had more time as parents with their children. So I suppose Andrew took advantage of that.
There's no doubt that Elizabeth had a blind spot for Andrew. He was always around when other children like Charles, even Anne or even Edward were not around as much. He was always made her laugh, and he lived very, very close to her. So that there was a sense that he had a lot of time for her and she had a lot of time for him. It was a love, you know, they like a mother-son love.
Were the Queen and Prince Philip good parents? Well, I suppose they were good up to a point. If you look at Charles, Anne and Edward, you can't fault them. But there's always one rotten egg in the nest, and Andrew was it.
Well, I think when Andrew came back from the Falklands War, you remember that vivid photograph and footage of him with the flower in his mouth, getting off the ship. You know, he was a hero. I think that he was undoubtedly somebody who was brave, courageous, was prepared to put himself on the line, and I think people respected that. It was also at that time, you know, as Prince Charles described him, you know, the one with the Robert Redford looks. He was a good-looking guy.
Here we have this dashing, handsome prince, this helicopter pilot, this war hero, and at the end of the war he steps off the ship and he's got this red rose in between his teeth and he looks handsome and the Queen is there to greet him. And I think he was the nation's darling. The media were all over him, they thought he was great. So clearly, you know, she adored him.
I think the impression that you got of him was that titles were very important to him, hierarchy was very important to him, and he very much struggled with the idea of being spare. And really, after the Falklands, where he served Queen and country, struggled after that to find any real meaningful role for himself.
Even though Andrew was, you know, after Charles, was the next in line to the throne for many years until Charles married and had children, you know, he was never really expected to take the throne. And actually, every time Charles had, first had William, then had Harry, that meant he was further down the line of succession. I think he still regarded himself as very important and never really truly recovered from being downgraded, even though it was inevitable.
Andrew had 20 years in the Royal Navy. He retired eventually with the rank of commander. Not very high, but it's as far as he was going to go.
So the Duke was appointed trade envoy by the government, and it was about promoting the UK PLC, promoting British business abroad. And actually, in some countries, this is really effective. For example, in Middle Eastern countries, where the rulers are members of the royal family, they much prefer talking to their equal, to another member of the royal family, than they would do talking to a politician, to a member of government. So yeah, he really did open doors in that way. There started to be a drip feed of negativity surrounding Prince Andrew's travel. So he was undertaking quite a lot of travel as his capacity as a member of the royal family, but also as the special trade envoy. So suddenly he became Air Miles Andy. because of the trips he was making on aircrafts.
He took advantage of that job. He was sent abroad to do a job of work, but he would throw his golf clubs in the boot of the plane so that he would have time off to go and play golf. That was not his job. If he wants to play golf, he does it in his own time, not in the time of the taxpayer. He managed to bring people together, but he was arrogant. Embassies hated dealing with him because, as far as Andrew was concerned, embassies were working for him. Well, they weren't working for him, they were working for the British government and for the people of the country. He then started getting involved with all sorts of dodgy people. He's one of these people, you think of a cartoon character that's been given a lot of money, how do they depict it? They depict it as dollar signs rolling in the eyes. And that was a bit like Andrew. He loved the idea of money and lots of it.
Pretty.
I suppose things started going wrong when he met Jeffrey Epstein in the early noughties.
This guy had his own island, he had mansions in Florida, he had a townhouse in New York, so this was a guy who was seen to have a lot of money, and I think that attracted Andrew like a fly to a flame.
He'd known Ghislaine Maxwell for quite a while, and she was the one that introduced them. And Andrew got sort of sucked into Epstein's net.
Andrew would argue, and did argue, that he was inviting Ghislaine Maxwell to events, and I think he described Epstein was her plus one. I think it was much more than that. I think he was inviting them as a duo. Epstein was in a lot of parties. He was at Royal Ascot, he was at parties at Buckingham Palace, at Windsor Castle, he had stayed at Sandringham. All of these things are showing that Andrew had a degree of trust in this man, which was either totally misplaced or he just felt that I'm going to do what I want to do. I know when he threw this just simple shooting party, as he described it, at Sandringham House, that the staff were quite shocked when there were poppers, lube, condoms, all in every guest room for each of the guests. And I think the Queen would have been quite shocked that her house was being used in this way. This is a man that he loved his massages. He used to have Guru come from India once a year with a whole load of the staff, and the Queen was paying something like up to £36,000 while they stayed at Royal Lodge. He also, when he would travel, would always have massages after the flight. I think there was one instance I was told about as when he was in New York, a larger masseuse lady turned up and he just sent her away. He said, basically, get me a more attractive one. This is the type of character that he was developing into. I was surprised because, this was a man that, in his younger days, was seen as a playboy, was seen as always had attractive women on his arm. It just seemed odd the way that he became, as he sort of lurched towards middle age, rather gauche and unsavoury.
He's not the brightest bunny on the planet, but probably felt that because he's Prince Andrew, Duke of York, that he could get away with anything. Palace were aware of the people that he was associating with, but again, there's only so much you can do to say, you can't do that. And he will tell the people that are telling him that he can't do it to push off. It's none of their business. That's the sort of person he was. Andrew was not endowed with the greatest amount of intelligence.
Then in 2011, the relationship between convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein and the Queen's son, Andrew, became public, and that really was the beginning of the end.
I was the late Queen's press secretary, and of course this photograph of the Duke of York and Jeffrey Epstein was published. And of course Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted paedophile, a sex offender, and of course we were all gasp. Goodness, none of us knew that this had taken place. It was a total surprise and almost the worst photograph you could imagine possible being published and republished and republished. And it was relentless, and we were working well into the night every weekend, dealing with another hand grenade, really. You know, something else being lobbed at us, and we'd put that fire off, and then another fire would start somewhere else. It was a story that just was not going away. I remember Alistair Campbell, Tony Blair's press secretary, saying to me, if a story lasts longer than 10 days, you've got a problem here. You know, you're digging yourself a massive hole. This story has lasted 15 years.
And then what happens? That photograph of Andrew with Virginia Giuffre, a woman who accuses him of some very serious crimes, was published. That led to perhaps Andy's first punishment. That led to him being dropped as a government trade envoy. It was a job that saw him travel around the whole world promoting UK trade. It also made him rub shoulders with leaders, businessmen, politicians from the four corners of the globe. He enjoyed it. He was known as Air Miles Andy. He loved flying around the world, having the life of luxury. And it was taken away from him. It is extraordinary that we knew this about Andrew. It's incredible that it wasn't dealt with then. It was such a huge scandal at the time, and somehow he's gotten away with it for so many years. You could see the car crash happening.
To be fair to her, and to be fair to the Prince of Wales, as he was now the King, Andrew said categorically that he was innocent, that he hadn't done these things. I know for a fact that he had a meeting with King Charles when he was Prince of Wales. He said, no, it's all untrue. And he would have done exactly the same thing to Her late Majesty. And she clearly believed him. Otherwise, I think that action would have been taken much earlier.
How are you today, sir?
In any scenario like that, you've got to establish a fact. But you can only get the facts on the information that's given to you. And now, of course, we have learnt only this year that in 2011, he actually sent an email to Jeffrey Epstein saying basically, you know, we're in this together and, you know, stay strong. So it would have been very difficult for the Queen because she was being given information which was clearly only half truthful.
Over the years, more and more came out about not only Jeffrey Epstein and his depravity, but also Andrew's links to Jeffrey Epstein. And so after Epstein died, there was a huge groundswell of opinion that, hey, Andrew needs to explain himself here. If he's innocent or he's guilty, he needs to come forward and tell us what he knows. And unbelievably, he did.
For him to agree or to be persuaded to appear on Newsnight with Emily Maitlis, who does not suffer fools gladly at all, I just found absolutely extraordinary. You know, if you want to rehabilitate yourself and you wanted to get your side of the story over, don't choose Newsnight. Do something like, you know, Harry and Meghan did. Do sort of Oprah. Do something soft. Do something gentle. Do something that, you know, is not going to have its claws out for you.
Well, I couldn't believe it was actually happening. I couldn't believe that it was allowed to happen. The Newsnight interview, as we know now, was all about Andrew's association with Jeffrey Epstein. As far as Andrew was concerned, he really wanted to promote one of his ideas. It was an organisation called Pitch at Palace. It was there to help young entrepreneurs kickstart their ideas into business and into fruition. And more often than not, it actually worked.
Are you ready?
Yes. But news people, being news people, didn't see a story there and decided maybe an interview about his association with Jeffrey Epstein would be better. And they put it to Andrew. And after much humming and hawing, he agreed to do it.
Clearly the Duke was keen to get his story across. And he thought, okay, this is my time to shine.
He would have told his mother he was doing an interview for television, for BBC, not necessarily the subject matter. His daughter thought it would be okay. His private secretary thought it would be okay. And Andrew, off the back of that, thought it would be okay. The trouble is that it wasn't okay.
There were almost ridiculous points in that interview.
Going to Pizza Express in Woking is an unusual thing for me to do.
lines about not sweating, which I have to say made my skin crawl a bit.
I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time.
Honestly, I just thought, thank goodness I'm not there.
Is there anything you feel has been left unsaid that you would like to say now?
That was his massive opportunity to say, I mean, my thoughts and prayers are with the victims who have been trafficked, who have been exploited, you know, in any set of circumstances.
No, I don't think so.
But he chose to say, no, I don't think so. So, yeah, as a comms person for me, I thought...
I was not just shocked, I was angry that the man could be such a fool, such an idiot.
I think that Andrew definitely underestimated Emily Maitlis. I think he underestimated what Newsnight's agenda was, which essentially was to just expose him if he was lying and to also put him on the spot. And she did that. It was absurd, yet he thought he'd actually done a good job and told the Queen that he had.
After the Newsnight interview, the public went wild. Everyone was horrified by what he said and also what he didn't say. Action had to be taken. Quite rightly, Andrew stepped back as a working royal. How could he continue being a working royal after watching that Newsnight interview? And he had to give up, or forced to, requested, whichever way you want to say it, he lost his patronages. He also lost quite a lot of business links. Pitch at the Palace was something that he absolutely adored. That slowly disappeared and ultimately was abandoned. But it was a wake-up call for Andrew because he realised that after all these years of getting what he wanted, he was now having things taken away from him.
I think the Queen acted decisively and quickly after that by stripping the titles, military affiliations away from the Duke of York. I think he would have been humiliated and devastated. Every member of the royal family has some sort of military affiliation, and he was a serving member of the Royal Navy. To have those titles stripped from him so publicly must have been a severe blow to him and to his ego.
It would have been something that she would have been reluctant to do, but realised that it was something that she had to do, because he would not have been allowed to get away with what he did get away with having said on television to the world. His friendship with a sex offender, allegations that he had had sex with Virginia Giuffre. He's never been found guilty of anything. He hasn't been charged with anything. But the Queen would have been very, very upset by doing what she did in basically fire him from his role as a working member of the royal family.
Of course, when we've always asked Andrew about this story, about his relationship with Virginia Giuffre, he's always denied it. He's always denied it. And I think that's really important to say. I mean, there was a settlement that was made, but he's never, ever accepted that he's at fault. He's always denied the allegations.
It took her another 2 years to strip him of all the honorary positions and honorary military positions.
In early 2022, Andrew had insisted that he would fight the civil action brought by Virginia Giuffre. I think this sent Buckingham Palace into panic mode, quite frankly. It raised the issue it raised the idea, the very notion that Andrew could appear in a court and be questioned by prosecutors and have to face up to what Virginia Giuffre alleges face to face in a court. It was also coming in what would have been Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee year. There would have been a trial in New York during all the celebrations and commemorations for her wonderful reign. So Andrew was summoned to Windsor Castle to meet his mother. He was with a friend and a lawyer. The friend and the lawyer was made to stand outside, and Andrew was summoned inside. And that's where he was told, if you are going to persist with this case, then we are removing your HRH title. We are removing your royal patronages, basically telling Andrew that if he carries on going, he's on his own.
The aides or senior courtiers insisted on being in the room at the same time. Two men that didn't really like Andrew, didn't have very much respect for him whatsoever, To have them there in the room while his mother stripping him of his privileges and titles and his patronages would have been hugely humiliating for him personally. But at the end of the day, I don't really have a lot of sympathy for him. I think this is all totally self-inflicted. He was a mature enough guy to understand that what he was doing, who he was associating with, that was going to end up being damaging for the royal family and hugely damaging for himself.
It was really hard for the Queen, but she was supported by Charles and by William.
Well, I think the key player in a lot of this action against Andrew was Prince William. I think there was one moment when, after he'd lost his titles and he was going to be at the Garter ceremony as a Knight of the Garter, and William said, as also a Knight of the Garter, said, well, if he's there, I'm not going. That showed you the power that William, as a future king, has. There's no love lost between him and his uncle, because that would have put the Queen in a very invidious position.
With Charles, with William by her side, she did the right thing. Despite the Newsnight car crash, the Queen did stand by her son. In both public and private, she maybe had a weak spot for him, and I think maybe that she believed him a little bit too much. You've got to remember that this is her son. So, like any mother does, she was willing to be loyal to Andrew.
We saw Andrew escort the Queen to the memorial service for Prince Philip. That was a big, big statement by the Queen that she still had faith in her son, whilst all around was saying, no, it's over. She still wanted him to say, well, he's my son, he has a place in the royal family. I think that was the moment she sort of declared her colours really publicly. The fact that the Queen would go riding with Andrew, the fact that it would be known amongst the other courtiers that he would be spending time with his mother for afternoon tea, it was difficult for them to say to her what she had to do, but they did. Sources close to Andrew and the Queen were saying this relationship, he's not told the full truth and it is damaging the monarchy. I don't think she was listening, and by that stage in the 90s, she didn't want to hear it. There's no doubt that since the Queen passed, more decisive action has been taken.
The King stripped him completely of everything. It would have been a very difficult decision. I believe the late Queen left him with a ticking time bomb, that this is something that was going to happen sooner rather than later.
I think that both William and the King felt things needed to change, but things happened very quickly after the email uncovered by Channel 5 that exposed Andrew as a clearly proven liar, that he had issued an email to Epstein after 2010 in which he said, we'll play again. Hugely damning for him, but the most important thing is that it proved that he'd lied in the Emily Maitlis BBC Newsnight interview. I think William and Charles by that stage had frankly had enough. William in particular thought that having an association with Prince Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor was a stain on the brand and the stain on the monarchy. No one ever thought he'd be stripped of the title Prince. He has been stripped of the title Prince. I think it's pretty devastating, but shows you decisive action. That would have never happened on the Queen's watch or if the Duke of Edinburgh had been alive. I think because both of them would have said he was born a prince, he remains a prince.
She went as far as she was prepared to go at the time, given she was not a well woman. She was becoming frailer by the day. She had mobility issues, which we're led to believe that she had cancer of the bones. So she'd probably gone as far as she was prepared to go, given the state of her condition.
Well, Royal Lodges has been his home for a quarter of a century. He spent millions of pounds on it when he first moved after the death of the Queen Mother. you know, is his home. I think for anyone to be thrown out of their home, whether large or small, in your mid-60s, must be pretty damning.
He is leading a very lonely and solitary life. It's going to be living at Sandringham in very much, by comparison to Royal Lodge, where he's got 30 rooms and 90 acres of land. It'll be considerably smaller.
Well, for Andrew, it has been the absolute downfall. You know, from grace, he's lost everything. The sense that he's been abandoned by Sarah, reports that his youngest daughter, Eugenie, really doesn't want to have anything more to do with her father. He's lost his home, he's lost his charitable causes, his business initiatives, many, many friends along the way. He's lost his place not just on the Buckingham Palace balcony, but around the family table at family events. He is resigned to a life in exile now.
Epstein is haunting him from the grave. It's not going away, it never will go away. With the death of Virginia Giuffre, that too is still haunting him. He still denies the photograph is genuine. He still denies ever having had sex with Virginia Giuffre.
I think the problem for the royal family is that there will be a drip feed on more emails and more photographs on Epstein.
To ask whether Andrew's choices has damaged the late Queen's legacy is a really difficult question. I feel that in years to come, that idea may grow a little bit more. I feel that the Queen was looking after her son. She believed it was the right thing to do. She maybe was not furnished with all the information. She may have been lied to. Her son may have lied to her. She may not have fully understood what was coming down the road. She did take action. The things that she did matter. After the Newsnight interview and in 2022 when she summoned her son to Windsor Castle, these things were epic at the time. These things really did change Andrew's direction and in many ways save the royal family, because if they'd let it rumble on, you know, it could have got even worse. It could have dragged the monarchy under. It
was the Queen's decision ultimately not to be more drastic with the way that he was dealt with. But she had so much credit in the bank, if you like, that didn't really impact upon her legacy.
I think people did have a certain sympathy for her. She had all of this personal stuff played out on a global stage, and she was sort of entering the twilight of her reign. She didn't want to have this overshadowed for all the most extraordinary work that she's done in the years she's been monarch.
Well, one thing that is important to differentiate when it comes to any royal scandal is that the monarchy is essentially the monarch, that's it. There is a difference between royal family, the firm, and the monarchy. And the rest of this down here is the noise.
It was clearly damaging, but the wider monarchy, it was focused very much on Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein. But no other member of the royal family who are, you know, continuing to undertake engagements want to have, you know, the shine taken off what they're doing. It is a massive distraction. The Queen wasn't walking in Central Park with a convicted paedophile. The Queen was here as our head of state doing her duty.